Hi, everyone. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, uh, whichever time of day it is. Local time is 11 p.m. and I am, well, in my thoughts, virtually, I am in St. Petersburg, as you can clearly see. And I decided to just stick to the same backdrop because it is St. Petersburg and because it's a tour about women and me looking so girly in the heart of St. Petersburg. So I just decided to stick with it. Hello. Come closer. This is my assistant. Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So Grisha is just super tired of like 2 days in a row guiding with mommy. And right now he's finishing his home task in English, by the way. He has some home task in English. So yeah, working moms have no idea how single moms do all this, raising children, working, staying positive. Okay, so what time is it for me? It is 11 p.m. Hi, Andy. Hi, Dorley. Hi, Elizabeth, Joanne, Susan. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining, everyone. Hi, Marilyn. So I'm in Tbilisi. I'm not in St. Petersburg physically. I wish, I had been there, but hi, Michaela. Good to see you. Jared, you have 4 children. Oh my goodness. My hat off to you. Wow. Yes, Madeline, my son is up late. Yes, that's true. Luckily, he doesn't really have to wake up super early for school, but he wouldn't be able to go to sleep without me just reading him, and I didn't have time to do that. So, well, we'll make it up tomorrow, going to bed a bit earlier. 12 noon West Coast of Canada. Okay. Well, wow, crazy time zones here. Wow, wow, wow. Mr. PA is doing fine. He's doing his homework because he didn't get to finish some of it, and I allowed to do it in the evening. Okay. Oh, wow, Dolly. Wow. Three sons and 3 kids each. Wow. That's lots of presents for grandchildren then. Wow. Okay, so let's not waste any more time. It's time to begin. And this is a one-off tour. This is a tour about special women from St. Petersburg from different periods of time. Originally, I thought I would focus on different social strata, and I even thought to include such, royals as Catherine the Great or Elizabeth, but I've been talking about them so much on different tours about different aspects of their life. And probably it's a better idea, I now think that it would be probably a better idea if I do, like maybe some talks about some of these, figures, historic figures, such as royals. And I know that some of you at least are interested in the Grand Dukes and Grand Duchesses of the Romanovs. And well, we could do that. So let me know in the chat if you're interested in some talks like that. I know this is not going to be very popular, and I don't expect many people to be joining, but this is something I could be doing. But for this tour, I decided to tell you about the women of St. Petersburg that I have sometimes mentioned on my tours, but never really had time to talk about them in in details. I just never had time to give them enough attention or like enough focus. And they are of different social classes. They're women of different walks of life from different periods, and it it doesn't mean that I support or I agree with these women. I'm just telling you their stories from different angles, and yeah. So, and of course, it's my choice. It's just totally my picks, and I can't really tell you if there is like any. I don't. There's no agenda behind. It's just some stories that I find fascinating. I don't necessarily support these ideas or, well, agree, but, well, okay. Thank you, Mary. It is history. Yeah, it is history. It is interesting. Royals and all women who contribute to the world. So people have just a fascinating history. Yes, indeed. And some of this, most of these ladies, I don't really think, well, some of them are famous, like on a world scale, but most of them not, of course. Most of them are known to, let's say, people were raised in like in Saint Petersburg, or like, people from Russia, or at least, or in broader sense from the Soviet Union. Well, so let's just spread some word. Thank you, Charity. Thank you, Charity. Oh my goodness, you're fantastic. Wow. Okay, so let's start sharing the screen. So the photographs that I sourced for this presentation, I just found on the internet. That's basically it. But there is a little bit from my camera roll from the times of St. Petersburg. Which I thought it would be a good idea to show you something, from the city, not just the women. But just very quickly about the history of the holiday, which I'm sure many of you are very well familiar with. Basically 1857. This is when the women first went on strike. These women worked in textile industry, so ladies, the tailors, so went on strike. And this was the very first women's strike when women collectively, actually thousands of women in New York, they ignited this fire, fighting for equal rights, fighting for a normal, work day, not like 17 hours per day, you know, the better pay, the better conditions. And this just ignited the chain of these, protests, for demonstrations for women all over the world. Well, Europe, okay, Europe mostly. And this is how, very quickly, more and more countries, more and more cities would be involved. And obviously, there are many women, internationally that I could be talking about. And I'm pretty sure some of my colleagues have done tours about some of these ladies. But basically, if it applies to St. Petersburg, the first women's strike would take place in 1908, and by that time it was already decided that this holiday Women's Day, the demonstrations would be taking place on the 8th of March. It was it took a long time. There would be several dates, sometimes February, sometimes March, but eventually it would be decided that the 8th of March would be the holiday celebrating women's victory in the men's world, finally fighting successfully, obtaining at least some rights, at least some concessions, no matter how really horrible it sounds. But that was the men's world for sure, and I believe still is in a way. Well, anyway, so first it was the women that worked at bread exchange, and then every year it would be, there would be some demonstrations, but it wouldn't be violent, and it wouldn't be very effective. But when the First World War started, then, the First World War initially was something that was supposed to take Russia less than a year, to win and to achieve the goals that the country was setting, and then they thought that would be it. So, sounds familiar? Rings a bell. Been there. And then it didn't work this way, and the country was dragged into this long, draining war. And by 1917. Russian men had no idea what they were actually fighting for, what they were dying for, and also women, they had no idea what was going on. and there was shortage of bread, there was shortage of supplies, and there was almost no men in the city. So eventually, in what was supposed to be just a demonstration of women, celebration of women, and it ended up as a riot, as a big mess. Women asked to quit the war. Women asked to bring the man back. So here it's saying return the soldiers to their family, protect the freedom and the peace for the people. That's basically what it was saying. And here this is like give food to children. And that I'm not sure. There's something about model, and I can't really understand what that is. So women were asking, just to bring the man back, and they were asking for normal life. And this happened on the 23rd of February, old style, as you know, after the revolution. Russia switched to Gregorian calendar, and it became the 8th of March. So the 8th of March, actually, what started as just a demonstration ended up into big mess, and that revolt actually became the very first revolution, kind of a bourgeois revolution of It's called February Revolution, but actually it's the old style date. But the new style date is exactly the 8th of March. So in Russian history, the 8th of March is not only the International Women's Day. This is the date of a big change, because after the February demonstration, Nicholas II, was forced to abdicate, and then it will be a completely different story. So you know that very well. So this is just a little bit of some introduction and how this holiday came to Russia, and how it changed many things. And one of the women who actually before the revolution brought this holiday to Russia, 1908. This was the first demonstration, right? Alexandra Kollontai. Alexandra Kollontai was actually from a noble family. From the early childhood, she was a very independent, very free-spirited woman that got a great education. She spoke several languages, and when she was already in her teens, she fell in love with a distant relative, and the family didn't want them to meet, didn't want them to get married, so they sent her away to Europe to study and to forget about that man. However, well, okay, so she almost forgot about that infatuation, that crush that she had. I was kind of first love and things like that. But she met some people, liberals, Democrats, and she got involved in those secret student clubs and societies, and this wasn't really looking good. And her family, well, of course, she told the family how she felt and how she wanted to change the world and to change the life. And she was members of somewhat semi-legal organizations in Europe. So eventually, the family said, "Okay, come back, and okay, you can marry this man." So she returned. They got married, and see where they went for their honeymoon. Tbilisi. This is the photo of early 1900s. By that time, she had already been the member of the Bolshevik Party, and they went for honeymoon without actually telling anyone. And the superiors of the party thought that they kind of deserted the party. So, they were found, they were caught, they were actually taken aback, and Lenin managed to Lenin at some point, because actually they faced imprisonment and maybe even worse than that. So, but Lenin got involved. By that time, Lenin already heard of Kollontai from Europe, because she, as I said, she was member of several semi-legal organizations, and she was quite, loud in her demands, and like, well, she wasn't really, keeping it low. So he knew of her, so he got he kind of saved her and her husband. So Dybenko was her husband, and she continued her work for the party. She gave birth to a son, so she had one child. They had one child together. But well, life as a housewife and a mother never really appealed to her. So she asked the party to transfer her to Europe, and she left her son and her husband in St. Petersburg, and she left. And in Europe, she would be one of the representatives of the Bolshevik Party. She would always be, one of the negotiators, and eventually she was hired as a representative of the Soviet Union in Norway. I didn't mention that, but when she was in Europe, when in Sweden, uh, she misbehaved a lot in one of the secret gatherings of the revolutionary clubs, and the King of Sweden actually signed a document. Actually, he signed the ban for her, so she was never really allowed to go back to Sweden. But when in Norway, when she was appointed actually as when she was appointed as she was appointed an ambassador of the Soviet Union in Norway. She was a woman ambassador. King of Sweden was forced to cancel the ban, and she would be traveling all around Northern Europe, and she spoke Swedish freely. She spoke Norwegian. She learned languages really quickly. And she's not the only woman that had some fantastic linguistic abilities. I don't know, there's something, with these ladies. And she would be working for about 20 years representing the Soviet Union in Europe, especially in Northern Europe and Central Europe. She managed to negotiate hundreds and hundreds of deals or between Europe and the Soviet Union. She also in early 1940s she negotiated also she was involved in different negotiations about the Second World War with allies and also with representatives of the rivals. And then also she when in St. Petersburg, even when in St. Petersburg, and always all the time when in Europe, she would be fighting for women's rights, and she managed to put forward some very important law bills, such as the civic marriage. It became legal. It was absolutely legal. Then women finally had the right to apply for a divorce, to file for a divorce. Back then, before that, women could not initiate a divorce. It was something, very difficult to do. Men could do it quite easily. Well, there were a lot of, there was certain procedure, but in general, men could do that. Women could not apply for divorce. Then she also made sure that women, actually had, women actually in Russia after the revolution. So women were in 1918, women got this right to vote, and Russia was one of the first countries, one of the first countries to allow women to vote. Now, for some countries, it took really years and years, sometimes even 50 years, but finally that happened. But with Alexandra Kollontai, who will be representing many women, in mostly, of course, working class women, even though she was from an aristocratic family. But she was, I would say, quite an exception. And Lenin and then Stalin also appreciated her work. and they would never really focus on her background. So she continued to represent Russian women, represent working women, and even when abroad, even when in Norway, she still kept in touch with lots of feminist women in Europe, and of course in the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union, there would be a lot of work, for women. A lot of like feminist activity would be done by wife of Vladimir Lenin, Nadezhda Krupskaya. But I wouldn't be talking about her tonight. So just one woman, Alexandra Kollontai. So this is a 20th century character, but now about the 18th century character, Ekaterina Dashkova. I mentioned her several times when I did a tour about the Academy of Sciences in Saint Petersburg, because she was the first woman director of an academy of science, and not only in Russia, in Europe. Well, that's at least the information that I get. And she was one of the most educated women of her times, and the only woman that she could really compete with in terms of, like achievement or education or, I don't know, wits, would be actually Catherine the Great. She was a very close friend to Catherine the Great, while Catherine the Great was still just Grand Duchess, because as you remember, I still cannot but mention Catherine the Great. This is how great she was. Well, obviously, ruled for over 40 years. So Catherine the Great came to Russia from Prussia. She was just a wife, to a Grand Duke that would eventually become Peter III. But as you know, her husband ruled only for half a year, and then Catherine the Great arranged the coup d'état. And one of the people who helped her was Ekaterina Dashkova, who was from a well, super noble family. Her descent was even higher, a little bit higher than than the descent of Catherine the Great and her family. And well, Benjamin Franklin is here for a reason, because when Catherine the Great got the throne, she would appoint Ekaterina Dashkova as the head of the Academy of Science. She had the entire academy in her disposal, and Catherine the Great would be sending that Dashkova to different business trips to Europe. And when in Paris in 1770, Ekaterina Dashkova met Benjamin Franklin, and they actually got on well, and they actually became pretty good. Well, not like friends, but they kept on sending letters to each other. And there is a big collection of their letters, of all the correspondence it just kept. And this is the web from the website of American Philosophical Society, which, by the way, which Ekaterina Dashkova was made a member of. So thanks to Benjamin Franklin, and thanks to her scientific papers and all the merits, she was made she was made one of the first women members of American Philosophical Society. So that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Normally, we talk about Catherine the Great and how she was friends with Voltaire and Diderot. Okay, that's great. Well, yeah, it's the absolute monarchy, and Catherine the Great was an absolute monarch. This is true. And yes, she was very educated. Yes, that's true. But there were also other women around her. And at some point, and by the way, this is the how the building of Academy of Science looked in the 18th century, at times of Catherine the Great, basically. and the times of Ekaterina Dashkova. And then maybe, we don't know, but Catherine the Great sacked her, and they would never really be talking to each other again. So whether it was just a competition and Ekaterina Dashkova was just becoming way too important, or, there were also rumors that Ekaterina Dashkova could uh, could be flirting with one of the favorites of Catherine the Great, and she had many favorites, and it's like, okay, if one favorite is no longer interested in her, she always had somebody to choose from. But we don't know. Something happened between them, and she fell in disgrace, and she was made to leave St. Petersburg. There is one more version that in her memoirs, Ekaterina Dashkova described the coup d'etat, all the details of that night when Catherine the Great sent the troops to Peterhof to well to arrest her husband and send him to jail. Many details of what happened in St. Petersburg, and who swore to serve Catherine the Great, who didn't, who was punished for it, and who was not. Many names were named, and maybe that's what Catherine the Great didn't really like. And I kind of get it. Well, that's the story. But Ekaterina Dashkova managed to do a lot. She managed to hire a lot of professors to do the research in Russia, and also to teach to students, because obviously there was much need for specialists in different sciences. She managed to she issued a lot of different researches, and she was also editor-in-chief of a satirical journal. So that could be another reason. That could be. So we don't know. But she did a lot, and thanks to her, the Academy of Science got bigger. The Library of Academy of Science got twice as big. Speaking of science, there's another lady I would like to talk about, and probably there. Well, it's a shoulda, woulda, coulda saying, but it looks like that. But for Dashkova, there, well, couldn't have been such scientists as Sofia Kovalevskaya, who lived already in the next century. She lived at the turn of the 20th century. So obviously there's no connection between the two, but Sofia Kovalevskaya was a mathematician, and she was the first woman who had a PhD in mathematics, and she was she was one of the first women professors in Europe, in Europe, and she was the first woman to teach mathematics at higher educational facility. The thing is, though, that so she how shall I put it? Before 1860s, even in like 1870s, there were very little freedom given to women. Women even didn't have passports. That's how bad it was. And women would be registered in the passports of their husbands, of their fathers, if they were not married. That was the thing. Women were not allowed to get education. But gradually, in the 1860s and the 1870s, and why 1860s? Because in 1860s, there was a very, very big reform, the abolishment of slavery, of serfdom. And of course, this ignited a lot of other reforms. And one of them would be allowing women who got permission from their husbands or from their fathers, if they were not married, to study, to get education. It sounds something really bizarre now, but that's how it was. So without a permission from a man, woman could not get any education. And many women had to get married. Well, it was just a marriage of convenience. So they had to get married, and they even had to pay to these men to give them permission to study. And gradually, well, there would be more. Well, eventually that would be canceled, and women could study. There were in the 1880s and 1890s there were a lot of there were several courses for women. And by the turn of the 20th century, there would be a number of professions where women would be allowed to work, such as librarians, such as secretaries, and working at the telegraph station, operators, things like that. And by the way, this is Vasilevsky Island, where we not long ago had quite a number of tours, very off-beaten area. And those tours were quite, special. I never had too many people on the tours. And it was basically like, like friends walking together in the city, enjoying the quiet streets with no tourists. That's how it felt to me, at least. And in this house, Sofia Kovalevskaya lived. And I have a short video that I actually prepared, that I might have even showed it to you on one of the tours of Vasilevsky Island. I'm not sure, but I just decided to add it because, well, I have it, so I have this content, so why not actually sharing it? And Sofia Kovalevskaya also, well, she had to marry. She married. She got the permission. However, she later on fell in love with her husband of convenience, so to speak. And she went to Europe. Well, she studied, first of all, she studied in Russia, and then she was sent to study in Europe. And once she just came to Europe, to Sweden, she impressed the professors with her great knowledge of mathematics and her unusual, like, really thinking out of the box. And she even managed to solve a problem that couldn't that the no well many people have been trying to solve it, like, for like 5 years or something, and she managed to solve it. Don't even ask me what it was. I don't know. It's like mathematics it was a torture for me. It's always been like that. So I know nothing about mathematics. So, but she, as I said, she became the first woman to obtain PhD in mathematics, and then she was asked to teach in Europe. She became a professor of mathematics in Sweden. Then a German university gave her also gave her an award and gave her a title. And then she also got the recognition in Russian Academy of Science eventually, after all those years. And she was also incredibly talented in languages. When she was little, she was given a domestic education, and she could speak French and English easily. And then she also she just she had other siblings, and she heard them, you know um they were having classes, and she just heard them speaking other languages, and she would also, pick up on it very quickly. And also how she actually became a mathematician. That's interesting. I don't want you to see this. It's just the backyard of the house. I just want to just another minute of your time about Sofia Kovalevskaya. Then we have a Q&A, and then we continue. When she was little, in her house, for some reason they didn't have enough wallpapers, and somehow somebody decided to stick the papers from a book on mathematics, like a lecture on mathematics. So they just glued the walls, and they just would stick it to the walls instead of the wallpapers. And she was just studying it, looking at it, staring at all those formulas. She was a little girl, so it didn't really make much sense to her. But as she grew up, it actually turned out that she remembered everything. And this kind of was the way she started her, path, her career in mathematics. And also, So she taught in Sweden. Then she was invited to read a lecture in Norway, but she didn't speak Norwegian. So she was allowed to give lectures in German. It was a big exception, but she was allowed. That's how exceptional she was. And then 6 months later, she just switched to Norwegian, and she would be giving lectures on mathematics in Norwegian after like 6 months uh, of studying it. So that's Sofia Kovalevskaya. Okay, so there you go. The chat is back on. The Q&A. And while you're sending in the questions, if you have any, I would like to share with you the schedule for the next weekend. It's quite likely that I will be adding a couple more tours. So there is definitely a tour of Israel missing. So there will be one. I just haven't decided which area I'll be showing you next. And also, this is the link to my website. There are a little bit more tours scheduled for other days, and my YouTube channel that still has a lot of videos in open access, including the tours I did yesterday, and this one is going to be there for some time. Also, here are the links to my PayPal and Buy Me account if you wish to thank me for the tour. And last year, I did 5 or 6 episodes on the Jewish women. It started as just one-off tour about the remarkable Jewish women, and they were not Israeli women. It was basically Jewish women of different periods of time. I didn't include really, long time ago. I focused on like 19th and 20th century. But it turned actually I ended up, I think, doing 5 or 6 episodes. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much. So I'm thinking to actually share it on my YouTube channel for about 5 or 3 days, just to spread the word, because well, some of those women were quite known, some were not, and some of them did contribute to the establishment of the Jewish state, and also just in many of them didn't have any Zionistic background at all, didn't have any Zionistic agenda, but they did fight for women's rights, and we should be thanking those ladies for all their achievements. So when I was when I was in Saint Petersburg, I saw the beautiful singer Zoom machine building. I was told that they hired seamstresses to sit in the windows using the sewing machine. I there at the shop windows, I never heard it. Never. I don't know what I well they didn't really need to promote themselves at the time they built the house, because by that time they already they've already monopolized the entire country, the entire market. They were the only sewing machine factory, and every day, even very distant corner of the Russian Empire, people knew about them because they would be sending catalogs everywhere. So by the time the house was built, there was no need to popularize it. It was the house was built there because everybody knew, because everybody wanted to buy the Zinga machine, and there was a great demand. So they just realized it would be more efficient and cheaper just to open the office. I don't know, Piera, but that would be my thinking. I might not. It's quite possible that I just don't know something. I don't know everything. So, but I will double check. I will find out. Uh, Marilyn, no news. When I get the news, I will let you know, regardless of the result. No news, and this is kind of really it's really keeping me in the air. I really don't know like what to do, because I really need to like buy tickets. Do I need to buy tickets to go to Israel again for my oral exam or not? But if I don't buy them in advance, they're going to be even more expensive. And flying to Israel now is, well, not super cheap, and like many things, many things. So I'm just on the fence, and I don't know really what to do. So that's uncertainty is definitely the last thing I need now. But okay, so let's move on. We'll have another Q&A in the end. Okay, so that was Sofia Kovalevska. We talked about her. We just walked a little bit in the house where she lived. Another woman. So again, I just wanted to show you women of very different women, not just feminists, not revolutionary, well, not even like I would say even terrorists. There will be one, really a woman terrorist. So it's not because I like these women or because I don't like these women. It's just, and I wanted to show you how diverse it was and how different, women were. So Ksenia of Petersburg. I mentioned her also on the tours about Vasilevsky Island. And so she lived at times of Catherine the Great. And Ksenia of Petersburg was actually an ordinary woman, and she was from a very religious family, but like most people were religious at that time. And she got married. She was happily married. They lived together with her husband for several years, and then all of a sudden he died, and he didn't even have time to confess to his sins and whatnot. And then it was considered something like really bad. They believed that if there was no confession, if there was if there was no priest, saying him goodbye, if there was no preparations, so it was considered something really bad. And Ksenia of Petersburg, Ksenia, so something happened to her, and well, of course, death of husband is never easy, but something happened. And one day she just changed her clothes and she would be wearing men's clothing. And later on, she would, well, this is, for example, the illustration of her wearing a man's clothing. But in most cases, so in most illustrations, she's wearing a dress, a long skirt. But actually, there are accounts of contemporaries saying that she would be wearing the clothes of her husband. She would be walking from town to town. She would be walking in St. Petersburg, introducing herself as her husband with his name, and she kind of tried to live his life and compensate for his unexpected death, something like that. At first, people thought she was a lunatic, but then something happened, some something mysterious. Where she was, like if there were sick people or people who had troubles, once they talked to her, once she talked to them, they started feeling better. All their problems were solved. Uh, would be solved. So that's or let's say if for example a carriage gave her a lift, and of course she didn't have money, so it would be given for free. That day there will be a very 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 good money earned for that day, and she brought people good luck. And if somebody, well, attacked her or somebody attempted to attack or harass her, those people were punished. So there were some mishaps happening to them. So eventually, people would be calling her, well, Ksenia of Petersburg, and well, a miracle working woman, something like that. And then after her death, and nobody knows exactly how she died, but after her death, she would be she would be proclaimed a saint. And there is a chapel of Ksenia of Petersburg in St. Petersburg on Vasilevsky Island on Smolensk Cemetery. This is one of the very few cemeteries that I have shown to you. Joel, I know you hate cemeteries. I'm not sure if you had been on that tour. Um, but that cemetery is quite special. It has, well, you know, uh, has some really old history. And well, it's also important because this is a big pilgrimage site in St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg has a variety of places, many things to show. And it's not only palaces, right? But St. Petersburg, among many things, is also a pilgrimage destination for Orthodox Christians, and including, of course, the St. Petersburg Chapel. And up until now, people come to this icon, they pray to this icon, praying for miracles, praying for, uh, you know, to cure their illnesses, to women who can't conceive a child, so they pray, for the improvement. So people believe. So that's the story. So this is another story of a woman. But she definitely was a symbol of the city. Now a different story. 20th century. This is also another woman that I briefly mentioned long time ago on my tours of the siege of Leningrad. So there was a woman who was called the voice of the siege. The siege lasted for 872 days, if you remember. And this is when Olga Bergholz, in the besieged city, every day would be going to work to the radio station to read poems to people, to read the news. And so this is her, Olga Bergholz. She was a poet. And the history of her life, the history of her family, is one of the most tragic stories that really one can think of. And her story was complete. Well, it's not like, basically her story, it could be anybody's story. She wasn't the only martyr. She was among many martyrs. But since she was the voice of the siege, she helped thousands and thousands of people, actually more than 1 million people in St. Petersburg at that time. It was Leningrad, sorry, not St. Petersburg, but Leningrad, the Soviet name, the siege of Leningrad. That's what it's called. And the people didn't have food. People didn't have. There was no really supplies of anything to the city. There was no facilities available, but there was a radio. So there was radio, and people, of course, people were starving. People were weak. People could just walk in the street and then collapse because they had no energy left. But still, every day, Olga Bergholz would be going to the radio station to support people, because people knew that if there is still radio, if there is still poems of Olga Bergholz, this was not the end. Olga Bergholz, was married 3 times, and all her husbands died. They died because of the Soviet regime, because of the Soviet police, because of the reports. And this was the time that, something very similar is happening now in my country. I never thought this would be happening again. Nobody thought. But people reported on one another. And when she was pregnant, and she was expecting a child from her second husband, she was called for interrogation. And this is her first husband, but they got divorced pretty quickly. He was a poet, Boris Kornilov. They were very young, as you see, so they divorced quite quickly. And she met the second husband shortly after the divorce, and so they were happily married. They moved into a house in the street, in Rubinstein Street, where I guided you a long time ago. That's the bar street, the famous bar street in St. Petersburg. That's her second husband, Nikolai Molchanov. And so when she was expecting the baby, she was called for an interrogation to NKVD, basically to KGB, whatever. And one of the people she knew was suspected of treason, basically, espionage. And he named her as one of the accomplices, which was not true. But nobody cared. They needed to visit the house where they lived. And she was beaten. A pregnant woman was beaten and tortured until she confessed to what she had never done. She was, however, she was released. The baby died. So obviously, so the baby died. I don't remember what the term was, like several months. So the baby died. She was released eventually. Her husband suffered from seizures, and in 1942, so less than a year after the siege started, which started in September 1941, her husband just died because people just died during the siege. It was way too cold. There was no food, and this was the worst winter. 1941, 1942, it was the worst winter. Then she was arrested. It happened just a little bit over a year after that, after she lost her baby. She was pregnant again, and she was put into prison because somebody reported on her. The baby died. She was almost 6 months pregnant. The baby died. She miscarried, and she spent about 6 months in prison. She was falsely accused, but nobody could care less. And only thanks to her sister, who somehow managed to, well, she had to go to Moscow because at that time Moscow was the capital. So her sister, Natalia was her name. She had to go to Moscow, and she would go to KGB, and it took her weeks and weeks to get an appointment with one of the superiors. So this is, by the way, the photo from prison. Look at these eyes. Look into these eyes. So, and her sister managed to, well, it's not like she really could pull some strings, but she eventually she made it possible for Olga Bergoz actually to all the charges to be dropped off, and she was released. She spent about 6 months in prison for, well, this is a very powerful photo. This photo was taken after she was released from prison, and her sister is happy, right? So Natalia is happy. Her sister is back, is free again, and well, Olga Bergoz, look at her. So she would never be pregnant again. That's her sister. She would marry once more, and she saw her friends die from hunger. She saw her friends die just, collapsing in the radio station. But she continued to work regardless of anything. And she is called the voice of the siege because her voice. There are many stories. I remember when I was getting ready for my siege tours, I read a lot of memoirs of the survivors of the siege. And well, there was a story, which is it's very difficult to even remember it. There was a lady. Everybody died around her. So her child died. Child was lost, just went missing. And her husband died, and she was all alone in the apartment. She had the radio on, but the radio didn't work 24/7. So the radio was silent. and she just lay down. It was very cold. There was no heating in the city. People just could easily freeze to death in their own apartments. So she just laid for a minute because she was weak. I think it was like 1943, or maybe 1942. I don't remember. And she felt she felt she was dying. And then she heard the voice of Olga Bergotz on the radio all of a sudden, and her soul kind of got back to her body. And so she literally called Olga Bergolz her savior. So Olga Bergolz died much later. So she survived. She survived everything, but at what cost? Well, it's just and the last story of Sofia Pirovskaya. I promised you a terrorist woman, so this is a terrorist, Sofia Pirovskaya, who was born, by the way, in a very noble family. Her family members were her uncles were related to the Tolstoy family. So you could say that she was, from a Tolstoy family, and she was given a good education, domestic education. But again, just like Kovalevskaya, the mathematician, she had to, she couldn't just easily, obtain education, and she had to fight for her right to study. So her father eventually allowed her to study, and this is when she got involved also in the several like secret student clubs. And at that time, all this, it was the period of like 1870s, 1880s, when gradually education would be allowed for women, but the um of course, liberal societies were not welcome. And also, uh, 1870s was the year when Alexander II was in charge of the country. And Alexander II, as you know, there were many attempts to kill him. And in many of those attempts, Sofia Perovskaya, she was involved in many of them. So she was a member of several like secret societies, uh, quite radical ones, like People's Wheel, for example. It was called a terrorist organization, and it definitely was, because they were involved in many assassinations in many of the members of the Duma, members of the parliament, and also many of her friends would be involved in the murders of police officers, the members of the Tsar's police. Obviously, the secret police of the Tsar was working 24/7, and many of her fellow the fellow members were followed, and all of them would be, if caught, they were executed. And she even had a boyfriend in this in the People's Will terrorist group. And but despite the fact that the love of her life had just a few days before the 1st of March 1881 he had been executed. Despite that, she and several other members of the People's Will terrorist group, they arranged the murder of Alexander II. You know very well this illustration. This is the embankment of Catherine's Canal. On the 1st of March 1881, Alexander II's carriage was blown up by the terrorists. And as a result of which the emperor died several hours later. He just bled to death. Sofia Perovskaya didn't escape. She could have escaped because she wasn't really caught red-handed. She wasn't caught on the spot. She managed to escape. She managed to hide from the police, but she didn't escape to Europe because she could. She didn't. Okay, so this will be the last one. There is another woman, but I will skip it for now. And she was caught eventually, several days later. And despite that, yes, she was from a very influential family. It wasn't just a noble family. She was in the family. She was her father was in the government of Saint Petersburg. So despite many people who tried to talk the next emperor Alexander III, talk him out of really the public executions for at least some of the terrorists, uh, no, it was impossible. So all of them were executed. But of course, in the Soviet times, and by the way, the chat is open, so please feel free to send in your questions. I really cannot overrun now because I really need to put Grisha to bed. So the Soviets would be um, naming streets after Sofia Perovskaya. They in nearly every city there would be Perovskaya Street, and the streets where the assassination happened would be all named after those four members of the People's Will terrorist group. They will be named after them to commemorate, the names of the terrorists. That was a regime. That was the wild Soviet years. Olga had such a lovely, happy face at first. Yes, and you could clearly see the pain she suffered through her life. That's true. That's true. I read her memoirs and I don't want to I don't want to read them again. That was too much. Just too much. And yet she still kept on supporting the people. Yes, she literally saved lives. That's true. James, you're still keeping this notebook. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm sure if you just I don't know how many notebooks you have, but you might remember the story of Olga Bergholz. I told it on my siege tours in January 2022, and I even took you to the radio station where she worked, and I mentioned many other people. Um, yeah, there are a lot more women to talk about, definitely, and I will be talking about them more for sure. So I'm thinking to also share some recordings about the remarkable Jewish women, which I think is important because some of them are really not really known, but they should be, regardless of their Jewishness, honestly. So I think I will be doing that. Marilyn, you take notes too. Fantastic. On some of these women, you can actually find a lot more information. Well, for example, on the mathematician Sofia Kovalevskaya, the Dashkova. There is a correspondence between Benjamin Franklin and Dashkova. It's in the States. It is in the library of the American Philosophical Society. Yeah. Oh, Carla, it's um, it's a difficult topic. Um, I miss my city very much. And being uprooted for the second time in 2 years, it's I don't know where I feel anymore. I don't know if it's courage. I have no idea. I have no idea. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Yes, well, of course, there are videos. I will, if you could just drop me a line on Facebook or an email, I will send you the links. But once you become a member, you get an email with, well, a thank you email with the links. Uh, yeah, sure. Just drop me a line and I will send you the link. That's not a problem. New notebook too, Marilyn. Thank you so much. Okay, so once again, just let me send you the schedule for the next weekend. But as I said, uh, they're likely to add at least one new tour. I'm thinking it will be a tour in Israel because I have tons of content. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dolly. So here are the links. So at least 4 tours scheduled for next weekend, and there's a lot more on my website. as usual, my YouTube channel. So on YouTube, there is a secret playlist for the sponsor as well. So the link, drop me a line, I will send you it. I'll send it to you. And also, I share sometimes I share something from that playlist. I put it up for open access, for a very limited period of time. And also the lectures that I'm doing these days, I also upload them to my YouTube channel for a couple of days for everyone to catch with it. And then they go to the secret playlist. And also there are some recordings from Hago times that are not they're not published anywhere. And I sometimes share them for like limited time because it's like a back catalog of musicians, because like you will work so hard on the entire album, and then there are several hits, but the rest music is like gets less attention, but it has to live, it has to be listened to. And also this is with the tours, so I sometimes rotate it and give it another go, especially because I don't really repeat tours often. So, how do you become a supporter, Marilyn? Well, here is the link. To become my sponsor, to get access to, I think there are like 200 something tours. It's $10 per month membership fee, and then you get access. And I remember I still owe a monthly get together for my sponsors, and I will schedule it shortly. It's gonna happen in March. I know I'm late. I know that. I just had crazy February. Soviet Union was a fun place, not. And the horrible thing that it is coming back in a way. It's heartbreaking. It is. When I do the episode on the Jewish women soon, Robert, I will be uploading these videos on my YouTube channel. I won't be doing this tour again. I will be sharing the recordings that I recordings of the tours I did like a year ago. Yeah, it was a year ago exactly. The entire March was every week I did tours about remarkable Jewish women. I think there are 4, 5 episodes maybe. This is it. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, if you are my supporter or sponsor, I hate the word sponsor, but this is the term used by Hago, and it's just stick, it's just stuck. And if you are my supporter and you don't know the links or you're still not getting emails, contact me. I'll try to sort it out, and I'll definitely send you the link. And or if you have questions about becoming a supporter, contact me. Well, I'll walk you through it. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for the coffees, for PayPal, for your support, for your interest, and for your understanding me giving tours with my son, him jumping around. Thank you for it. It means so much to me. Thank you, and I will see you next week. Just next weekend. Thank you so much. Shavua Tov to everyone. What did Disha get today? He had a dessert with strawberries. Yes, smaller than yesterday because that was a bit too much. So something smaller. Yeah, I didn't take picture, but he enjoyed it. Thank you. I will, Carla. I will. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mary. It accumulates. I know. So that's why I went with something smaller today. I gave him a dessert. I bought him a nice dessert. Yeah, definitely. Okay, it's time to go. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone.